Why doesn't the Catholic Church allow divorce? For many people, this is one of the hard things about Catholicism. Why won't the Church change this teaching? To answer, let's start by talking about the nature of love. When a man and a woman profess their love to each other, they can't help but say that it's permanent. It just doesn't work for Romeo to say something like, "Juliet, darling, I promise to love you completely for the next 6 months." We all know that saying something like that isn't yet making a true commitment. Love, of its very nature, calls for something total, something permanent, even something exclusive. We want it to be forever. So if you put a time limit on your love, then you're not giving your full self away. You're holding something back. This is even more powerfully the case in a marriage. If a husband doesn't promise his whole heart and his whole life to his wife, and vice versa, then something essential to marriage is missing. This is why Catholic marriage vows are made until death do us part. It's what makes those vows different from any other promises couples might make to each other. The essence of marriage vows is that they are permanent and irrevocable promises to belong to each other and to be faithful to each other. Let's go back to Scripture. When Jesus spoke about divorce, his words were shockingly direct. We might even hesitate to repeat them today because they might offend someone. Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. In fact, the Gospels tell us that Jesus' listeners were offended by these words. Like his teaching on that other great sacrament, the Eucharist, even some of his own disciples questioned the seeming difficulty of what Jesus proposed. If this is the case, it would be better not to marry, some of them said. But Jesus didn't back down from this teaching because he knew it was something profoundly important for us to understand. Marriage is about a man and a woman being joined together by God in a special sacrament, and it produces a union that cannot be broken. As he put it, "Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. So they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder.'" That is why the teaching of the Catholic Church has been the same for 2,000 years. A consummated sacramental marriage creates an unbreakable bond between a man and a woman. It gives rise to a union that is a partnership of the whole of life. There is a deep theological dimension to this union. As St. Paul tells us in the letter to the Ephesians, marriage between a husband and a wife signifies Christ's own spousal love for his church and his unbreakable fidelity to her. Of course, someone might object, "Father, you're painting a beautiful picture of marriage, but the reality is that sometimes things go very wrong in human relationships. For example, what happens if one spouse is unfaithful?" This, of course, would be a serious betrayal of the marriage vows. By its very nature, a marriage involves a promise to be exclusive and faithful. Yet, even though infidelity wounds a marriage, sometimes very gravely, it doesn't destroy the sacramental bond itself between the spouses. Now, in some grave cases, for example, where a spouse is abusive, it might even be best for them to separate. But they don't cease to be husband and wife before God, and so they're not free to enter a new union. Now, in painful and difficult situations like this, the best solution is to find a way, eventually, to healing and reconciliation. In some cases, that might seem improbable or even impossible. But in every case, the Church wants to reach out to people experiencing such distress, to encourage them to turn all the more urgently to God, and, with God's grace, to support them in living out a Christian life. Sometimes people can be confused about the Church's teaching on divorce in relation to the Church's process of granting annulments. We'll have a separate video on that question, but to summarize briefly, that annulment process investigates whether there was ever a valid sacramental marriage in the first place. For example, whether both spouses intended to enter into a permanent and exclusive union open to children. If there was a valid marriage, then it can't be dissolved. But if there was a serious problem at the very beginning, such that no valid marriage ever existed, then the church may issue a declaration of nullity, effectively a judgment that since these people were never validly married in the first place, each of them remains free to marry. It might seem difficult or even impossible to bind oneself for life to another human being. And this is where the grace of God comes into the picture. That's why the fact that Jesus raised marriage to the dignity of a sacrament is so important. With God's grace, it really is possible to remain faithful to a spouse for life. That doesn't mean, of course, that there will never be challenges, even sometimes grave difficulties in a marriage. But it does mean that God will not fail to give to the spouses the graces that they need to remain faithful to their marriage vows. The Bible frequently speaks of God's relationship to us as a marriage covenant. No matter how sinful we are, no matter how far we wander from Him, no matter how often we are unfaithful to God, God will never stop loving us. Aided by God's grace, Christian marriages are meant to echo in this world the wonderful permanence and fidelity of God Himself. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends because it matters what you think.